Hey everyone, Nathaniel here with Beginner Food, and today we're going to be talking about sauces, how to make them and how to use them. We're not going to go over quite all of the French ones that you might have looked up before online, but we're going to take a little bit of inspiration from them. We're going to do a light sauce, a dark sauce. We'll do one with milk, one with fruit, and we're not really going to go over tomato sauce today because most of you guys have had tomato sauce before, and if you really needed to, you could just go buy it in a can. Not that we're saying to do that. Before we jump in, make sure you remember to like and subscribe and check out Beginner Food for more content. All right, so sauces. Sauces can be anything from as thin as water to as thick as mayonnaise, and that actually is a sauce on paper. How do we make them thick and thin? Well, we're going to use one of two methods. One is going to be a slurry. A slurry is going to be 1 part water, which we have here, and 1 part flour, or 1 part cornstarch, which I have not opened this one yet. We'll have to do that. There we go. 1 part cornstarch. You're just going to mix that together until all of the starch is dissolved. And then now you can add this to whatever your liquid is. And as you apply heat, it will thicken up. Now let's talk about the differences between the two of these. Cornstarch, when you heat it up, is going to be a lot glossier, and it's not going to make your broth or your sauce as cloudy. It's also going to thicken up a lot faster than your flour one here. Flour has an uncooked flavor, so you have to cook it till it's neutralized out. Also, when you add flour to things, it's going to make it a little cloudier, so it's like adding white to whatever you're cooking. Now, why do we add water first and make this kind of like pasty, slurry stuff? Well, that's because you don't want to put flour or starch into a liquid on its own. It's going to clump. It's going to turn into a dumpling, basically. So by mixing it with water first, we're adding a liquid to a liquid, and that's going to allow it to disperse evenly in whatever you're cooking. So that's going to be our first method of thickening up our liquids to make sauces. All right, so the next way to thicken up our sauces is going to be a roux. So a slurry was water and starch. A roux is going to be fat and starch. So in this case, we're going to use butter. So we got 2 tablespoons of butter right there. And we're going to melt this down. And then we're going to add our flour. And do 1 part fat, 1 part flour, just like we did with our slurry, except now we're using a fat. So we're gonna let this go ahead and melt down, and we'll put together our roux. So we've got our melted butter there. That was 2 tablespoons. So we'll add our flour in the same amount, about 2 tablespoons of flour. And then we're just gonna mix it together. And we're gonna mix it until it turns into, again, a type of paste, which you can see already happening there. Our flour is incorporated. We're gonna let it cook to get rid of that raw flour flavor. And with roux, we've got a couple different stages. Right now, we have a white roux, that's basically uncooked flour. As we continue to cook, it's going to turn into a kind of a golden blonde roux. And then as we cook it even longer, it's going to develop kind of a nutty flavor. It's going to be a brown roux or a dark brown roux. And each of these cooking stages is used for a different sauce. So as you can imagine, right now, we're starting to develop that slight blonde color, a little bit yellow. That's going to be for our white sauce, because we don't want to put something brown into our white sauce. It won't be white anymore. Same thing, when we're making our brown sauce, we don't want to put something white in our brown sauce. So we're going to want to put in a darker colored roux. Here we go. This is blonde right here. You can see it's a little bit golden brown color. And as we keep going and going, it's going to get darker and darker. and that's just the flour cooking and the butter starting to caramelize a little bit. Notice how it's now brown, and we're almost to a dark brown. So you can even smell it, starting to get that nutty smell to the butter. And we don't want it to burn, we just want it to turn brown. Now the more you cook it down, the less thickening power it's gonna have, because you're breaking down those starch molecules, but you are developing more flavors. So brown won't thicken as much as blonde. And here we go. Look how deep color that brown is. All right, and so here we have our brown roux. So it kind of already starts to look like gravy. It's got kind of like a popcorn smell to it from that butter and that cooked flour. But this is what we're going to use for our brown sauce. So we're going to go ahead and put this on the side, and we'll make another light one for our white sauce. And then for our blonde roux, we're really just looking to melt the butter and slightly cook the flour. We just don't want to have that raw flour flavor. So that blonde roux, it's going to look a little more yellow than a mashed potato. So there we go there. We've got our flour cooking, and that is our blonde roux right there. Put that off on the side. There we go. All right, so the first sauce we're gonna do is we're gonna take our blonde roux, put it into our saucepan here, and make sure our stove's on. There it goes. All right. All right, for our first sauce, which is going to be a white sauce, so we're gonna use our blonde roux and a light stock or a white stock. So these clear ones, chicken, fish, vegetable, those are all the ones we're gonna use for a white sauce. We've got our 1 tablespoon of our roux, and we've got a cup of chicken stock there. We're now gonna mix this together and let it reduce. So we talked about thickening with a roux, thickening with a slurry. Obviously, the other way to thicken a sauce and to increase the flavor is to reduce it. Reducing it is basically just boiling off the water. As the water leaves the liquid, everything except water gets more concentrated and more flavorful. So right now, as you can see the steam leaving the pot, that's water. The more that leaves, the more concentrated and flavorful this will become. All right, so basically we've been stirring it for a couple minutes, and you can see that the flour has bloomed. There's now a nice thick sauce here. Again, that's just our blonde roux and a cup of chicken stock. And now we have a sauce. Now this on its own is not really a sauce you would put on a dish. This is what's called a mother sauce, which means that you derive and add things to it to make more sauce flavors. But this is your basic white sauce made with stock. You can use a lot of those fresh herbs we talked about put in here. You can put onions or shallots in here, or highly recommend some white wine. This sauce is great for vegetables, chicken. You see it on fish a lot. You can add more butter into here, but this is the basis of all your white sauces. If you want to do a white sauce, start here, add in whatever you want to create more flavors and more combinations. How do you know it's done? It should look kind of like that, kind of like a wallpaper paste actually, and they say it should coat the back of the spoon. And that's our sauce. The next is our brown sauce, or in French is going to be a sauce Espagnole, or a Spanish sauce. Now they say it's called a sauce Espagnole because the chef who was making it was from Spain, and supposedly they named it in his honor for the country that it came from, and because they used Spanish tomatoes in the sauce. We don't really have any Spanish tomatoes, but we will add a little bit of tomato paste in the traditional method. So we use our brown roux, which we can see here, very brown. We heat that up. Take our tomato paste in place of our Spanish tomatoes. Adding about a tablespoon of that. And mix that in as it comes up to heat. And then once that's nice and mixed together, we'll add our stock. And since this is a brown sauce with a brown roux, we are going to use a brown stock. Traditionally, you would use veal, but much easier to find beef. So this is a beef stock. And we'll do 1 cup of that. Pour that in and stir. And in about a minute or two, that flour will start to bloom open and start thickening our sauce. All right, and so we can see here, the roux has bloomed and thickened our sauce Espagnole. So put that aside right there. And there we go, sauce Espagnole. And next one is a Bechamel. Now the Bechamel is going to be a blonde roux. So start with our butter. We'll add in equal parts flour. And we're gonna mix it together until we get that light blonde color. Cook out the raw flour flavor. And then a Bechamel is just like our white sauce, but it's made with dairy. So we're gonna use milk rather than stock. So you'll probably most be familiar with a Bechamel from things like lasagnas, Alfredos that we know of today are basically Bechamel sauces, and mac and cheese. Mac and cheese is gonna be a Bechamel or a Mornay, which is Bechamel plus cheese. So let's go ahead and get our blonde roux going here. And then we'll get our milk. We're using whole milk here because it will combine better with the butter. If you wanted a slightly lower fat version, you could use 2% or skim. But since it's basically made out of butter anyways, you're not saving too much there. So I'll go ahead and put the milk in. A lot of people say to add it slowly. I found that it doesn't really make that much difference as long as you don't heat it too quickly and you're stirring. So just make sure you're stirring all the way through. Get the sides, don't let it burn. And we don't really want it to boil. So there we go. We've now mixed our blonde roux and our cup of milk. And in about 2-3 minutes, that roux is gonna bloom and thicken up our sauce here. All right, so it's been a couple minutes and you can see here, this is our Bechamel. So that is a milk-based sauce with a blonde roux. And I'll go ahead and pour some out right there, put it aside. And we're gonna go ahead and take our remaining Bechamel here, literally just add a little bit of cheese to it, and stir to incorporate. And this is gonna be what's called a Mornay. And this is really the idea of all of these sauces, is you start with a base, then you can add in things as your recipe or your flavor desires. And there we go, that's a Mornay right there. It's bechamel with cheese. This is the stuff that mac and cheese dreams are made of. I mean, look at that. That's exactly what you're looking for. All right, so the last kind of sauce we're gonna talk about is a gastrique. That sounds really fancy, but at the end of the day, it's basically pureed something plus sugar and vinegar. So we'll go ahead and turn on our stove. And in this case, we're gonna use raspberries. We'll make a raspberry gastrique. So just put in some raspberries, about 1 cup there. Put in our sugar. And we're gonna hold off for a little bit and then add our vinegar. So really, what we're doing is just smashing this stuff all together, letting it cook down, do what is effectively jam or preserves. Don't want that to burn. Really mash that stuff all together, and so you'll see there, getting smoother and smoother. Traditionally, you would strain out the seeds. If you really want it to look fancy, you can definitely do that. If you're just looking to make a sauce, it's up to you. Seeds don't bother me too much, but if you want to, you can strain this out at the end. We keep mashing up our berries, letting that sugar cook down. And again, this is basically how you would make jam. So right now we have raspberry jam. In a pinch, you could probably just put jam and vinegar together and cook it down. We'll do ours from scratch today. Just mash everything up, turn up the heat a little bit. And basically we'll just start seeing that sugar bubble. Just about there. You can start seeing it here on the side, bubbling just a little bit. Now it's on both sides, and then quickly it's going to come right through the middle, and we'll turn it down. So now you can see big bubbles on all the sides. And we'll give it one more stir. Everything's bubbling. Turn it down and add our either sherry or champagne vinegar. And really, it's now just a matter of reducing this down to whatever consistency you're looking for. If you want it more tart, you add more vinegar. If you want it more sweet, you add more sugar. And again, just cook it down to whatever consistency you want. Now, since this is a sugar-based sauce, as soon as you pull it off the heat, it will tighten up. So just remember that whatever your final looks like in here, it's gonna be a little bit thicker as soon as it's off the heat. And that's basically it. That's our gastrique. All right, so our gastrique has reduced down. All of our sugar and vinegar together. We will strain this one out just to give you guys a look at the classic finished product. We'll just get a spoon to get a little bit more through there. There we go. And that is our gastrique of raspberry. Ready for the plate. All right, so now you've learned how to make basically four, not quite mother sauces, but we'll call them types of sauces that you can customize and extend to whatever you're cooking. We've got your classic white, brown, milk-based, and one made with fruit. So you should be able to take these, make sure you season them to your taste, add in some herbs, add in some wine, and really get out there and start cooking. I'm Nathaniel from Beginner Food, and if you want to find out more about these sauces, how to use them, and more recipes of the sort, check out beginnerfood.com.